One person is injured as a letter bomb explodes at the Paris office of the International Monetary Fund. Malaria reaches epidemic proportions in Burundi. And it's a catwalk showdown as bloggers and magazine editors vie for fashionistas' attention. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. The violent Boko Haram insurgency against the Nigerian government began in 2009 in the northeast Borno state. Since then, more than 1.8 million people have fled their homes, causing a dire humanitarian crisis. Now, more than $1 billion is sought to meet their needs. UN Security Council diplomats recently traveled to the region to assess the crisis. VOA's Margaret Bashir accompanied the group and has this report from Maiduguri.
Most displaced persons are living among host communities. Only about 122,000 live in camps. Teachers Village is one of them. It was built to house educators but has never served that purpose. Instead, its crude brick houses shelter some 7,000 people from northern areas where Boko Haram fighters have terrorized residents and burned villages. Camp residents are primarily women and children. Most of the men have gone to fight or been killed.
I have 4 children. We've been separated from my husband for 4 years now.
Thousands of children are losing out on an education.
Before the insurgents struck, our children were in school. Now that we're displaced, our children cannot go to school.
Food shortages compound their misery.
It is only when I go outside the camp begging that I am able to feed the children.
More than 20 million people have been affected by the crisis caused by Boko Haram. Here in the Lake Chad Basin, the governments are struggling to cope on 2 fronts: stabilizing the security situation and dealing with the overwhelming humanitarian needs. Here in northeastern Nigeria, more than 8.5 million people are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. The United Nations says more than 3.5 million of them are here in Borno State.
The displaced women shared their experiences with the visiting UN ambassadors. The U.S. envoy summed up what she heard in 2 words:
protection and access. Protection, because I'm hearing stories not only of these families and these women who have been victimized, their children victimized by Boko Haram, but then the protection needs, especially of the women and girls, not only inside the camp, but also if they have to go outside, either for firewood or to seek some sort of income-generating activity. Protection and also access for the humanitarian aid to come in.
Insecurity has made it difficult to get aid to some 700,000 people in inaccessible areas. The ambassadors took away a new perspective on the crisis and will seek solutions back in New York.
We will be talking to all the different parts of the UN system, Humanitarian Affairs, UNICEF, UN Development Programme, all of the other bits about what more they could be doing now that we have seen for ourselves the scale of the challenge.
Council members hope their mission raises international awareness and funds for this neglected emergency. Margaret Bashir, VOA News, Maiduguri.
Well, police say one person was injured in Paris on Thursday when a letter bomb exploded in the office of the International Monetary Fund. No damage was reported in the explosion, and police quickly evacuated staff from the building before securing the area. IMF Chief Christine Lagarde called the letter bombing quote a cowardly act of violence. Lagarde says the IMF is working closely with the French authorities to investigate this incident and ensure the safety of our staff. The IMF letter bomb comes a day after a similar package arrived at the German Finance Ministry containing low-grade explosives. The package was identified as suspicious and destroyed by police. It is unclear whether the 2 incidents are related. Well, Uganda acknowledges that its security forces killed more than 100 people in an assault on a tribal leader's palace last year. However, a government statement denies the Human Rights Watch accusation that children were among the dead. Now, security forces killed scores of people in November when they stormed the palace of Charles Wesley Mumbere, a tribal leader of the Bakonzo people who was later accused of leading a secessionist movement. Mumbere and some of the guards there have since been charged with treason, murder, terrorism and other offenses which they deny. Well, the death toll from a massive landslide at an Ethiopian trash dump has risen to 115 on Thursday as emergency workers in Addis Ababa sifted through a mountain of garbage for the 5th consecutive day in search of more victims. Residents say at least 80 people remain unaccounted for. Meanwhile, dozens of victims have been buried at the Abune Aragawi Church. Ethiopia is in the midst of 3 days of national mourning for the victims of the disaster at the 50-year-old Repi landfill last Saturday evening. U.S. lawmakers are reacting with a cautious eye Thursday to the new budget blueprint released by the White House. President Donald Trump has made clear he intends to boost military spending at the expense of spending on the State Department, foreign aid and U.S. contributions to international organizations like the United Nations. VOA State Department correspondent Cindy Sain fills us in on the fine print.
Foreign Service officers and other staff members at the State Department and at U.S. embassies around the world have been bracing for massive budget cuts, as well as steep reductions in foreign aid, as global development expert George Ingram told VOA.
What I've heard is the cuts are likely to be in the nature of 30%. That the original OMB proposed cut was 37%, and that the Secretary pushed back and said, don't do 37% in the first year, phase it in over 3 years, and that what we're likely to see is a budget cut in the range of 30%.
Human rights and humanitarian aid groups say the impact on refugees and other vulnerable people around the world would be devastating, as Odote Akwai told VOA via Skype.
Civil society organizations, governments, I think are all extremely concerned about not only the withdrawal of resources or the cutting of resources, but I think they're also concerned about the vacuum left by the absence of the United States as a partner, as a generator of innovation, of creativity, and also, of course, as a voice on human rights.
But some analysts say the State Department is a bloated bureaucracy that would benefit from cuts. Former diplomat James Roberts spoke to VOA.
So I think there's plenty of room to reorganize, to make the State Department really a better, more efficient, more effective player as representative of the American people, a player overseas, because it's going to have a simplified lines of authority, and where money will be spent, it'll be spent better. And yes, there will be cuts that will also have to be made as a result of that.
George Ingram also worked as a senior staff member on Capitol Hill. He says Congress will not go along with such steep cuts to U.S. foreign aid and diplomacy.
What we've seen in the last month is a bipartisan outcry from members of the House and the Senate that a drastic cut to the International Affairs account is unacceptable. So I think you're going to see some real pushback by the Congress this year.
The global fight to defeat the so-called Islamic State would also suffer from drastic budget cuts to U.S. diplomacy, says one Republican senator.
I want the committee to understand that any budget we pass that guts the State Department's budget, you'll never win this war. As a matter of fact, ISIL will be celebrating.
President Trump's budget will likely be the focus of fierce debate on Capitol Hill in the months to come. Cindy Sain, VOA News, State Department.
Well, after 6 years of budget cuts, the U.S. Navy is expected to see a funding increase in President Donald Trump's new budget. VOA Pentagon correspondent Caleb Babb recently visited an aircraft carrier conducting strikes against Islamic State and reports on why the world's best-funded Navy argues it needs more money to prepare for future world threats.
This is the U.S. Navy we're used to seeing. The USS George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier, striking Islamic State targets, dominating the waterways it roams.
There's no shortages for us. We've been loading weapons aboard. We've gone through 2 periods right now where we've loaded extra weapons on board. We've loaded plenty of fuel. Our parts are coming out in a steady fashion. I've not seen any readiness shortfalls from this end.
But there's another side to this carrier's story. Prior to deployment, the USS Bush spent about a half year longer than expected in the shipyard, undergoing critical maintenance. The result? Despite the Navy having 10 completed carriers, not a single one was deployed in the Middle East region for about 2 months.
We did spend a little more time in the shipyard than we would have preferred.
The Navy wants billions in additional funding to help fix its maintenance backlog and to buy new weapons and equipment.
One of the big ticket items the Navy is requesting is about 25 more of these F-18 fighter jets. Here aboard the USS George H.W. Bush, these fighter jets are being used in different ways. Some of them have bombs attached right here on the wings, and they are conducting strikes against Islamic State, while others, if you look over here, have a big fuel tank attached to the bottom, and they are refueling the jets conducting the strikes.
Despite the need for F-18s in the counter-ISIS fight, officials say nearly 2/3 of the Navy's F-18 Hornets can't fly, grounded for maintenance after flying thousands of hours more than they were originally built for.
Our legacy Hornets, which we in the Marine Corps operate today, are well beyond their design life, let alone their service life.
The Trump administration's budget released this week could increase defense spending by $54 billion, with much of that going to the Navy.
We will give our military the tools you need to prevent war and, if required, to fight war and only do one thing. You know what that is? Win. Win.
Former Pentagon Comptroller Mike McCord says that boosted budget will not improve naval readiness without a long-term financial commitment.
If you don't have adequate funding, then having more ships, more sailors with the same budget you had before, or only a slight increase or an unpredictable or unsustainable increase, they're all chasing the same level of resources, and you're not necessarily going to be much better off.
That means the proposed funding boost will require even more money in the future. Carla Babb, VOA News, aboard the USS George H.W. Bush.
Well, African migrants heading to Europe via the Mediterranean Sea are often prey to abuse, beatings, imprisonment and rape while traveling through the Sahara Desert and lawless Libya. Now, migration officials say a campaign to inform would-be migrants about the dangers they may face aims to reach people in 15 African countries through social media, radio and television adverts. The Aware Migrants campaign, which was launched last year by the Italian government and the International Organization for Migration, features video testimonies of migrants who made it to Europe but were abused, beaten and raped. Now, the campaign is targeting potential migrants across West and Central Africa with posts on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and Instagram and adverts with local media. An IOM spokesman, Flavio Di Giacomo, says the campaign objective is to quickly provide them with as much information as possible. Now, President Donald Trump hosts German Chancellor Angela Merkel at the White House on Friday for their first meeting with the future of the transatlantic relationship hanging in the balance. VOA senior White House correspondent Peter Heinlein reports the two leaders have some rather fence-mending to do before they can proceed.
On the campaign trail, Trump accused Chancellor Merkel of ruining Germany with her lenient refugee policy.
I used to be a fan of Merkel. I used to think she was terrific, a big leader, a great leader. I think what she did to Germany is a disgrace.
The chancellor was equally scathing in describing Trump's travel ban on 6 mostly Muslim countries. Now, forced into a partnership to deal with the world's most critical issues, Merkel was conciliatory.
I am deeply convinced that the transatlantic partnership based on common values is in all of our interest, not only for us Europeans. I'll hold my talks with President Donald Trump in this spirit.
When they sit down together at the White House, Trump and Merkel will have to overcome deep differences on some of the world's thorniest issues, such as the viability of NATO.
I'm a NATO fan, but many of the countries in NATO, many of the countries that we protect, many of these countries are very rich countries. They're not paying their bills.
Merkel is going to want Trump to clear up confusion about the U.S. position on NATO's role in countering Russian aggression in Ukraine, says transatlantic relations scholar Daniel Hamilton via Skype.
NATO has put more of its troops within the eastern part of the alliance because many allies are very nervous about Vladimir Putin, his intentions. He has annexed illegally part of Ukraine, and he has had Russian troops in other parts of Ukraine. The question is, what is the United States' approach to Russia, and how does that affect NATO?
Compromise is said to be in the air on another thorny issue, trade. Trump, the negotiator, has said he prefers bilateral trade pacts, but Europeans insist that the EU represents all 28 countries in trade talks. Peter Heinlein, VOA News, the White House.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover, so join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Coming up, grim news for Burundi as the malaria outbreak is declared an epidemic. Stay with us.
Science and technology, here's what's new.
A personal electric transportation system at the Geneva Motor Show by Airbus called Pop.Up. It's a car combined with an aircraft. Take your car to the launch pad, your cabin detaches from the wheels, and is picked up by a 4-rotor flight module. At least that's the concept, according to Matthias Thompson of Airbus.
You're in your capsule. You don't have to go in and out. It's integrated, it's seamless. It'll be the most pleasant way of getting around town, getting to the airport.
The concept depends on future infrastructure to allow autonomous vehicles to fly above cities, but Thompson says one day this trip will be as close as your smartphone.
It's operated by a platform. We're thinking request via your app or other devices. We have wearable technology which identifies you when you get in.
Too far-fetched? Thompson says no. Pop.Up could be a reality in 5 to 10 years. For VOA's What's New, I'm Martin Seacrest.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
Well, it's time for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with grim news for residents of Burundi. Lino.
That's right. Health experts say more than 700 people have died of malaria this year in Burundi, prompting the government to declare the disease an epidemic. The Burundian Minister of Health says the determination was based on findings of a survey by Burundian and World Health Organization experts. According to the WHO, some 8.2 million Burundians, 73% of the total population, were affected by malaria in 2016. Nearly 4,000 people have died and 1.8 million cases of malaria have been registered since the beginning of the year. Authorities say the government is dispatching doctors and healthcare providers to villages to care for patients who cannot afford to go to hospitals. Burundian officials say they need at least $31 million to fight the epidemic. Now, the more scientists learn about staying healthy, one thing seems increasingly clear. To stay fit, mentally and physically, you must keep moving. But moving can be hard when most people sit at desks all day. A new study suggests that even if you spend all day in a chair, well, a couple of hours a week of movement may be enough to keep you healthy. Here's VOA's Kevin Enox.
For many modern workers, sitting is a huge part of the day. We sit during our commute, we sit during work, and then we head home and sit in front of the TV. And no doubt, all this sitting can be bad for you. But a new study from scientists in Britain and Australia have made some interesting discoveries about sitting. First of all, it turns out not all sitting is the same.
The type of sitting is important to study, because sitting is not done on its own. So people very often sit while doing something else at the same time. They can be sitting working, they can be sitting watching TV, they can be sitting driving. And to some extent, the health properties, the health influences of sitting depend on what else we do.
Generally, sitting as part of a sedentary lifestyle has long been linked to type 2 diabetes and cancer. But the research shows being healthy is about what people do after a day in the chair.
Lifestyle has many components. It's not all about sitting. For a person who does a lot of exercise, perhaps sitting is of secondary importance. But we should not forget that the reality out there is that only a minority of adults are physically active. The large majority of adults do very little exercise and very little physical activity in general.
The research showed that 150 minutes a week of exercise counteracts any of the negative effects of being still at a desk all day.
We should not forget that the sample of our study were a group of office workers who were very physically active. They were walking for approximately 45 minutes per day. This is a lot of walking. And it is perhaps that this high level of physical activity protected them against diabetes, and this is why sitting seemed to matter less.
The research suggests that sitting isn't the real problem. It's inactivity that kills an estimated 5 million people a year. So if you want to stay healthy, make sure you're moving when you're not stuck in a chair. Kevin Enochs, VOA News, Washington.
Let's get moving then. Well, that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Vincent?
All right, let's keep moving. Thanks a lot, Lenore. I'll be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. And it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Magazine editors, watch out. Now, fashion bloggers are closing in. We'll be right back. Keep moving.
Very good to see you. You know our ambassador, of course, baby. How are you doing? Nice to see you. Thank you so much for making the time to see me.
How do you see the world?
I see countries in turmoil.
I see our planet changing.
I see people at peace.
No matter how you see the world, you'll get an unbiased and uncensored view of it on Voice of America. On television, radio, online, and mobile. In more than 40 languages all day, every day. Millions of people tune us in.
How do I see the world? On Voice of America.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Now, front row seats at fashion shows were once almost exclusively for the rich, the famous, and the magazine editor. In today's world, these seats are now also shared with fashion blogger, and their influence is growing. The new breed of style connoisseur can be seen at show live broadcasting to their hundreds, thousands, and even millions of followers on social media. Increasingly, a blogger's accessibility and their personalities make them the preferred source for style. Experts agree that working together will be the new trend for bloggers, the magazines, and their editors. Well, next up, video clips from the Chengdu research base of giant panda breeding in China show what happened when pandas become stubborn. In one clip, Mama Panda kept kicking one of her daughters away from her delicious food, a large bamboo shoot. Now, the cub did not give up, but in the end, Mama won out. In another clip, Panda cub Fushun, an internet celebrity who gained fame in 2016 after a picture of his face planting on the ground went viral, was seen refusing to get off his favorite tree when his breeders tried to take him inside. He even landed a final kick to the breeder's face before being subdued and taken in. Well, and finally, smart gadgets keep getting smarter, and the latest tech finds are on display in Berlin. This is the augmented reality 3D tracking system from German startup VisionLib. It can recognize physical 3D objects and add graphics directly on the objects. The software can, for example, recognize a toy car and add an augmented reality layer, which allows the user to change the color of the car on the screen. Another startup company at the conference is the British firm BodyTrack. The company has developed a connected headphone set that has a sensor that measures body heat, heart rate, and movements. Now, the device connects to a smartphone or any other Bluetooth-enabled device and feeds real-time information. And that is what is trending today. Well, powered exoskeletons may help people with weak muscles move better. Exoskeletons are often made from metal, which means their joints are rigid. Now, researchers at a university in Switzerland are working on flexible rubber robots that could replace the metal joints in exoskeletons, making them far more flexible. VOA's Deborah Bloch explains.
Robots with muscle-like moving parts are made of silicone rubber that would make it easier for people who are impaired to move more easily. The supple polymer could be used to replace the stiff material in exoskeleton joints.
Only deal with rigid materials or heavy metal materials. You can imagine having something like that tight against your body. It doesn't really give or take if you push against it too far. With these materials, you can push against without hurting yourself in the process, or if it applies the force in the wrong direction, then you don't cause any unwanted injury.
The robots are controlled by changing the air pressure in special soft balloons that serve as its body. The modular system can be moved around the patient's body to wherever physical support is needed, and that includes people with lower back pain. The researchers have designed a belt for potential use on stroke patients, holding them upright during rehabilitation exercises and guiding their movements.
Stroke patients lean to one side, and it could be used to correct for that asymmetry and then focus on, if you're using it to restore gait, the belt could do the task of providing your support for your upper body.
The belt is hooked up to a system of external pumps, but the researchers hope to make them smaller so they can be attached directly on the belt. Deborah Bloch, VOA News, Washington.
Well, and that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. If you feel comfortable, you feel safe and free of stress.
Comfort zone. Hey, I heard you tried rock climbing. How did you like it?
Well, it definitely made me face my fear of heights. It was scary.
It's good to get out of your comfort zone sometimes.
You're right. You know, I do